The message arrived on a Tuesday morning. It came through every radio frequency, every satellite dish, every communication device on Earth. The voice was cold and mechanical, translated into every human language simultaneously. The Velkhari Dominion, rulers of 17 star systems, had discovered humanity. They were impressed, they said. Humans had achieved faster than light travel in record time. They had colonized 3 worlds in less than a century. The Dominion wanted to offer humanity a place among the stars. The invitation was simple. Humanity would become a client species. They would provide labor, resources, and soldiers for the Dominion's endless wars. In exchange, the Velkhari would protect humans from the dangers of the galaxy. They would share technology. They would allow humans to exist. The alternative was not mentioned directly. It did not need to be. The Velkhari fleet hung in orbit around Saturn, visible to every telescope on Earth. 300 warships, each one larger than any human vessel ever built. Their weapons could crack planets. Their shields could stop nuclear explosions. They had conquered a dozen species before humanity even discovered fire. Earth's governments held emergency meetings. The United Nations Security Council convened in secret. Military leaders from every nation gathered to assess the situation. Scientists analyzed the alien technology and came to the same conclusion. Humanity could not win a direct fight. The Velkhari were too advanced, too powerful, too numerous. Admiral Chen Wei stood before the assembled leaders 3 days after the invitation arrived. She was 72 years old, a veteran of the Mars Uprising and the Titan Crisis. Her hair was silver, her eyes were sharp, and her voice carried the weight of a lifetime spent preparing for exactly this moment. "They expect us to negotiate," she said. "They expect us to beg for better terms. They expect us to act like every other species they have encountered." The room was silent. Everyone knew what was coming. "I recommend we do something different." The Velkhari ambassador arrived on Earth 1 week later. His name was Krelvin, and he stood 8 feet tall with 4 arms and skin the color of dried blood. He wore ceremonial robes that cost more than some human nations produced in a year. He smiled with a mouth full of needle-sharp teeth and spoke with the confidence of someone who had never been told no. The human delegation met him in Geneva. The building had been chosen carefully. It was old, traditional, unimpressive. The Velkhari valued displays of power, and humanity wanted to appear weak. The human representatives wore plain clothes. They spoke softly. They showed every sign of submission that the alien experts had identified. Krelvin was pleased. He had done this many times before. The pattern was always the same. The primitive species would resist at first, then realize their hopeless position, then accept their role in the Dominion. Some fought. They were destroyed. Some ran. They were hunted. Most simply surrendered and learned to serve. Humans, it seemed, were choosing the smart path. The negotiations lasted 3 days. Krelvin made demands. The humans agreed to everything. They would provide soldiers. Yes, they would pay tribute. Of course, they would surrender their colonies. Naturally, they would allow Velkhari governors to rule their worlds. Without question. Krelvin found it almost disappointing. He had heard reports about human aggression, about their violent history, about their refusal to accept defeat. But these creatures in front of him were docile and obedient. Perhaps the reports had been exaggerated. On the 4th day, the humans invited Krelvin to tour their military facilities. A gesture of good faith, they said. A chance to see what resources humanity could offer the Dominion. Krelvin agreed. He brought 50 guards with him, the finest warriors in the Velkhari military. He wanted the humans to see real soldiers, to understand what they would become. The facility was located in the Nevada desert. It was underground, hidden beneath miles of rock and sand. The humans explained that they had built it to protect their weapons from nuclear attack. Krelvin laughed. Nuclear weapons were primitive toys. His people had moved past such things thousands of years ago. The elevator descended for nearly 10 minutes. Krelvin began to feel uncomfortable. The humans smiled and told him they were almost there. When the doors finally opened, he stepped into a cavern larger than any structure he had ever seen. The cavern was full of ships, not small patrol vessels or transport craft, battleships, carriers, dreadnoughts, hundreds of them, arranged in neat rows that stretched beyond his ability to see. Each one was different from the human vessels he had observed, larger, more heavily armed, covered in technology that his sensors could not identify. "What is this?" Krelvin asked. Admiral Chen Wei stepped forward. She was not wearing plainclothes anymore. She wore the uniform of the United Earth Defense Force, covered in medals and insignias that Krelvin did not recognize. Her smile was not submissive. It was the smile of a predator. "This is our response to your invitation," she said. "We've been building these for 30 years. Ever since we detected your first probe in our system. We knew you would come eventually." Krelvin reached for his weapon. His guards did the same. They found nothing. Their equipment had been deactivated the moment they stepped off the elevator. The humans had technology that could disable Valkyrie weapons. That should have been impossible. "You cannot win," Krelvin said. His voice was not as confident as before. "Our fleet will destroy you." Chen Wei nodded. "Your fleet? Yes. We've been watching it too. 300 ships. Very impressive. We have 427. Would you like to know how fast they can reach Saturn?" She did not wait for an answer. She pressed a button on her wrist, and the ceiling of the cavern began to open. The ships started to rise, their engines humming with power that Krelvin had never encountered before. The light was blinding. The noise was deafening. The ground shook as thousands of tons of metal lifted toward the sky. Above them, the Nevada desert was splitting apart. Hidden doors, camouflaged for decades, were revealing the truth about humanity. This was not the only facility. There were others. In Siberia, in the Sahara, in the Antarctic, beneath the oceans. On the dark side of the moon, humanity had not been preparing to surrender. They had been preparing for war. The battle lasted 6 hours. The Valkyrie were experienced warriors. They had conquered a dozen species. They knew every tactic, every strategy, every trick that warfare could offer. But they had never faced anything like humanity. Human ships did not fight like the vessels of other species. They did not form neat lines and exchange fire at safe distances. They charged directly into the enemy formations. They rammed Valkyrie cruisers with reinforced hulls. They launched nuclear missiles at point-blank range and survived the explosions. They sent boarding parties into enemy ships and fought hand-to-hand in the corridors. The Valkyrie had never experienced close combat with humans before. They learned quickly that it was a mistake. Humans were smaller and weaker than Valkyrie warriors, but they were faster, more aggressive, completely unwilling to surrender or retreat. A single human soldier, outnumbered and outgunned, would continue fighting until their last breath. And often, they would take several enemies with them when they died. By the 3rd hour, the Valkyrie fleet was in chaos. Their commanders could not understand what was happening. Their ships were being destroyed by enemies who should have been easy to defeat. Their warriors were being killed by creatures they considered primitive. Krelvin watched the battle from a cell beneath the Nevada desert. The humans had not killed him. They wanted him alive. They wanted him to see. Admiral Chen Wei visited him when it was over. She brought images of the destroyed Valkyrie fleet, debris floating in the void around Saturn. She brought reports of the surrender messages that were being transmitted from every surviving Valkyrie vessel. She brought news that the Dominion's High Command was requesting immediate peace negotiations. "Your people made a mistake," she said. "You looked at our history and saw violence. You thought that meant we were weak, that we would destroy ourselves before we became a threat. You were wrong." Krelvin said nothing. There was nothing to say. Our violence is not a weakness, Chen Wei continued. It is how we survive. We fight each other because we are preparing to fight everything else. Every war, every conflict, every battle in human history has made us stronger. You thought you were inviting sheep into your empire. You invited wolves. The peace negotiations began 1 week later. They were held on a human space station orbiting Mars. The Valkyrie delegation was small and frightened. They had never been on the losing side of a negotiation before. They did not know how to act. The humans did not make demands. They made statements. The Valkyrie Dominion would release all client species immediately. They would surrender their military technology. They would pay reparations to every world they had conquered. They would accept human observers in their government. The Valkyrie ambassador tried to object. He said that these terms were impossible. He said that the Dominion would never accept such humiliation. He said that other powers in the galaxy would not allow humanity to become so dominant. Admiral Chen Wei smiled. It was the same smile she had shown Kelvin in the Nevada cavern. "They can come and discuss it with us personally," she said. "We will be happy to explain our position." The message spread across the galaxy within days. The Valkyrie Dominion, the most powerful empire in 17 star systems, had been defeated by a species that had discovered faster than light travel less than a century ago. Other powers took notice. Some were concerned. Some were angry. Some were afraid. All of them understood the same thing. Humanity was not a client species. Humanity was not a servant or a slave. Humanity was something new, something dangerous, something that the galaxy had never seen before. In the decades that followed, many species tried to test human strength. Raiders attacked human colonies. Pirates targeted human ships. Empires sent fleets to probe human defenses. All of them learned the same lesson that the Valkyrie had learned. Humans did not accept invitations on anyone else's terms. When the galaxy knocked on their door, they did not answer with diplomacy or negotiation or surrender. They answered with fire, with steel, with the full weight of a species that had spent its entire existence fighting for survival. The galaxy had thought it was inviting humanity to join a larger community. It was wrong. Humanity was not joining anything. Humanity was arriving, and the galaxy would never be the same. Admiral Chen Wei retired 5 years after the Valkyrie War. She spent her final years on Earth, watching the sunset over the Nevada desert. Sometimes she thought about Kelvin and his confident smile. Sometimes she thought about the 300 ships that had hung over Saturn, so certain of their victory. Mostly, she thought about what came next. Humanity had announced itself to the galaxy. The universe knew they existed now. There would be more challenges, more threats, more enemies who thought they could dominate the young species from the small blue world. She was not worried. Humanity had been fighting since before they could write. They had survived ice ages and plagues and wars that killed millions. They had crawled out of the mud and reached for the stars. Whatever the galaxy threw at them, they would face it the same way they had always faced everything. Together, angry, unbroken, and completely unwilling to accept anything less than victory. The invitation had asked humanity to become servants. The response had made them conquerors. It was not diplomatic. But then again, humanity had never been very good at diplomacy anyway.